Dear loving Father, I want to thank you for this day. Thank you for this morning. We bless your holy name. We magnify, we exalt you, Most High, Jehovah Shaddai, Jehovah Jireh. We honor you, Lord, and thank you for your protection this day, for the new week. Thank you, Lord, for all the students who have enrolled on this course. I thank you for all those ones who are able to view these videos, and I also pray that for those ones who have not yet been able to make it further, that Lord, you will make it easy for them, that they will be able to view these videos and understand the content. We bless your holy name. We honor you in Jesus' mighty name. I do pray and believe. Amen. So welcome to this class this morning, dear students. Last time we were looking at fertility rates, and we stopped when we were calculating age-specific fertility rates. We said fertility rate can be calculated as general fertility rate or crude birth rates, but we can also calculate it as age-specific fertility rate. The difference between age-specific fertility rate and the others is that for it is quite refined, since it looks at a specific age group and calculates the number of births per given number of women in that specific age group. And the purpose of this calculation eventually will be to lead us to the realization of which age groups within a given population are more fertile than others. And therefore, you will end up with classifications that the fertility of a certain country has an early peak, that the fertility of this country has a broad peak, that the fertility of this country has a late peak. But how do we get there? Because we do that by plotting a graph. For example, that when you have all the above rates of total age-specific fertility rate for specific age groups, we can convert those age-specific fertility rates into percentages by getting the number by the age-specific fertility rate of a given age group over the total number of births times 100, and then there you will be able to get the percentage. It's that percentage figure, like when you see on the screen here, that between age group 15 to 19 we have age fertility rate of 131.6. When you divide that by the total number of this is the total number of live birth in that specific age bracket, then you multiply by 100, you get a percentage, which percentage now shall use to plot. For example, the percentage here we have 9.9%. And then first I will cross check with this figure here and see what the answer is. But now when you move on to age bracket, for example 45 to 49, it's 69.1 over the total number of births. When you multiply by 100, you get 5.2%. The figure in the first calculation is not correct. It was a typing error, so we shall correct that. But then after getting all these percentages, then we plot a graph. We can plot a graph here where you will have age group on the horizontal axis and the fertility rate on the vertical axis. So that here, since you have fertility, here you have age group. Here you look at age group 1915. Where is the figure? You plot. Age group this to this 2024. Where is the figure? You plot. And then at the end of the day, you draw it as a curve. So we are able to tell whether that curve has an early peak or that curve has a broad peak where it peaks. For example, if it peaks around 25 to 30, that one we can term it as a broad peak. But it may peak at 20 to 24, or 15 to 19, 20 to 24, so that you will see a curve which peaks from 0, it peaks straight away, and then towards the other age groups it slants quite gently. That means there is an early peak. But it can also peak late on, so that at the start it is slanting, then it peaks at around 35 to 40. So that's why we derive these terms of early peak, broad peak, late peak. And this one, of course, defines the fertility of a certain nation. Because if we say that the country, its fertility has an early peak, it means that there are instances of early marriages in such a population. Those issues of like the scenario of developing countries. An early peak defines a scenario where people are giving birth quite early, between 15 to 19, 20 to 24, and most 24, 25 to 29. That's where the people are doing it most. That the broad peak speaks of a nation where people tend to delay a little bit into their late 20s and early 30s, that they are able to produce children. Then the late peak, this one talks of the developed world where people delay childbearing so much into their later years. That's when they go into bearing of children. But without, and therefore this kind of graphic representation clearly will tell us what category, under which category a certain place or a certain country is. For example, we do mention that most developing countries' age pattern of fertility falls between early and broad peaks. Fertility starting at younger ages and runs up to around 35 when it begins to decline. Because most people here in the developing countries, except for those who are not into family planning, by 35 they have stopped producing. Actually, these days, if you come across a 40-year-old woman pregnant, you start wondering. Actually, here we are still fine. I remember one time living in Indonesia, and if in Indonesia, if you found a woman of 35 pregnant, you would wonder if they have a tendency of producing quite early. So you realize in such a place, you realize there will be an early peak and a broad peak. Later on, women are not into childbearing. But also, it also talks of the scenario where women are marrying at younger ages. About 60% of Ugandan women have their firstborn before 20. So the women on this forum, in this class, you can take that statistic. I'm glad you're not part of that statistic. You are part of the 40% who have decided that you will have your firstborn after 25 or after 30. But 60% of Ugandan women have their firstborn before 20. People who drop out of school, people who give birth while in school, these friends of yours who are giving birth at campus, these are the same guys who are having their firstborns before 20. And of course, this is due to the fact that 54% of women get married before 18. You know, even with the laws that we have, defilement, childhood marriages, people still go ahead and get married before 18. Officially, families agree and they give away their daughter to someone. For the developed countries, the pattern of fertility falls within the late peak, i.e. beyond 25. I beg your pardon, beyond 35. Late peak, beyond 35. Because women here marry at later ages. I told you last time that when we were looking at determinants of fertility in the developed world, of course it has also people tend to stay in school for longer years. You know, is their scenario, a white woman will finish high school when she's probably 16, then they have a year there, pre-year before college. So they stay. Then when they join college, they finish their college studies. After college, someone says he's going around the world to tour. After that tour, he comes, now he goes to graduate school. From graduate school, he comes back, he begins to build a career, running up and down. Probably needs to go back to graduate school and again for another postgraduate degree. And then by the time they think about having a baby, they are in their early 30s. And then when they get married, because they have just fallen in love, they say they will enjoy their marriage for the first 5 years. You know, for them, they want to enjoy their marriage first. Not like us here, you want to you get married actually Most Ugandan women here or couples here, they get married on their wedding day. One of the woman is pregnant. There's a large number that the woman is pregnant on the wedding day. So in such a scenario, the enjoyment is not there. The others, of course, you have also enjoyed in your own way, but the other ones, for them, they want first to move around as a husband and wife, single, with no encumbrances of early morning illness or whatever, pregnancy and so ever. So they travel around the world, husband and wife, for 5 years, no babies. But it's a decision which is reached between the two people. I don't know whether you'd also consider that, but I know for us here, people now, even with my sisters here at campus, they are already yearning to have babies. So people there marry at later ages, but also take long to produce. So you'll find people giving birth between the age bracket 40 to 45 and 45 to 50. See where you even have scenario of women giving birth after 50 in the developed world. The other measure of fertility, lastly, is the total fertility rate, and this one is usually obtained by adding together the figures that we have obtained under age-specific fertility rate for women in each age group. And because the age group interval or the age year interval is 5, the class interval we are using is 5, then we multiply 5 by the sum of the values of age-specific fertility rate, and then we'll get the single index figure. Of course, if it's a single index figure, then the number of kids a woman would have between 15 to 49 years if she were to bear children at the prevailing age-specific fertility rate. So total fertility rate in simple terms is the total number of children a woman would have in her childbearing age, that is 15 to 49, at the prevailing age-specific fertility rate. So that's why we get the figures, all the other figures, the sum total times 5, we divide by 1000, because remember we are using 1000 as the constant. Everything we are defining it as per 1000 women of childbearing age. So eventually from our calculation we've had here, we get the figure of 6.6, and that means that 6.6 is the fertility rate of women in that given population. There is a question for discussion here which you should take interest in. It's looking at factors behind the high fertility rates in developing countries. I remember that one we already talked about last week, but probably you would move on to the second bit, what has been done in Uganda to reduce high fertility. A lot of things have been done in Uganda to reduce high fertility. One of them, of course, is the education of the girl child. You know, the government of Uganda came up with a policy where girls are given an additional 1.5 points when they are joining the university. And I think it has worked. As a person who works at a university, who teaches in a university, in UCU and probably elsewhere, I've realized that the number of girls attending university education is very soon, actually in certain courses, is way above the number of boys. And when we come to our campus, UCU here, we know UCU has more girls than boys. It's the scenario which we have, but this has been a deliberate policy of government. And of course, some people have come up to say probably government needs to reconsider it, because now the endangered species here is the boy child. The boy child is dropping out of school and nobody is caring about him. But anyway, nonetheless, the policy has been aimed at reducing fertility rate, because if I keep my daughter in school, for my daughter Nanyanga Reste in school, or Harriet Garenda in school for this long period, right now you're in year 2, now COVID also came in and now killed the whole semester for you. That means if you are going to graduate next year, it's not going to happen. You will graduate probably in 2022. And after that, after 2022, probably you will be 24 years. That's when you start thinking about having a child, because you know our policies, you see, we don't allow children giving birth or having children outside the wedlock. You must first get married, and then you Not just as you see, but it's also the principle of God. If you're a God-fearing person, you must take that into consideration. So therefore, you realize that the longer you stay in school, the more you delay childbearing, and the more your childbearing years keep on shrinking. My OGs who dropped out in primary school when we were around 12 years, 14, then now they have grandchildren. Me who stayed in school a little longer, I have not even taken a child to P1. So you realize that the scenario, that's what happens when you want to reduce fertility. Keep people in school longer. Longer. And I would advise you stay in school for as much as you can, because the moment you go into marriage, now all the other plans are eventually become crippled depending on the kind of partner you've gotten. Some partners are not supportive. They will give up on you. Some of them, they will give you an ultimatum and say, sit at home and look after my babies. Some of them will give you can't go abroad to go and study. This one, I know the ladies do this. You can't go abroad to go and study, even the men. When you go there, you'll start sleeping with other men or sleeping with other women. So we have that issue. But nonetheless, the government of Uganda came up with that policy. We've also had the family planning drive. These days, almost at every health center 3, there is a family planning services being given to people, extended to people. People used to be ignorant about family planning. We have these VHTs, village health teams, who go around the villages explaining to people issues of primary health care and maternal health and reproductive health. All these issues are explained to people. So that people are aware that you can have a small and healthy family. But we also have issues with the policy against early marriages. Government has been strong against early marriages. If these guys who are getting married at 13, 14, child marriages, the government is quite strong. If they learn of it, then you are in jeopardy, because you'll be taken to court. And several other things. What has been done, a lot of things have been done by the government to reduce fertility. Of course, I must also note that the government of Uganda is not quite that much into it, that they want to reduce fertility, because the leadership in this nation has been asking people to produce and produce and produce. The current government believes that the more people you have, the more market you will have. They don't know that you can have a lot of people, but when they are economically inactive, and therefore they are not consumers. So at the end of the day, government has again to spend a lot of money on sustaining this population. But that is the case. Not like other parts of the world where governments have come up with deliberate policies, just to cut fertility. So those are some of the issues we shall look at more when we meet. So what other part of another population variable of interest to us is mortality. And the mortality, here we are simply looking at death. When you hear the word mortality, what rings into your ears is death. And therefore we look at the death which occur within a population in a given period of time. Of course, just like fertility, the sources of data for mortality is usually those vital statistics. We have things like sample surveys and censuses. However, like when we're looking at fertility, death data in the developing world, in the developing countries like our own Uganda, is quite scarce, because not all deaths are reported. Not all deaths occur in hospitals. All deaths that occur in hospitals are recorded. But most of our deaths here, not most of them, many of them still occur in our villages. Someone passes away from his home, at his bed at home, and they prepare him. They will not take the body to the hospital. They will not do anything. In the developed world, if someone passes away like that, still they will call the ambulance, and the body is taken to a postmortem to ascertain actually if the person is dead. Did you know that here in Uganda we still bury people when they are not yet dead? And those are the instances where you hear that the person was being buried, then he coughed. It's because you guys, you think you are too clever. You don't want to take the person to the hospital to ascertain if the person has actually passed away. You are not a trained medical person to know who is dead and who is alive. For example, in your traditional society, in your local environment, in Ntungamo there, or there in Kapuchorwa, or there in Kisoro, in Kawale, or somewhere there in Arua, Koboko, or somewhere there in Kalungu. How do you know how to tell the person who is in a coma? You know very well that even telling that this person is in a coma, they are put on a life support machine, and the life support machine will show you that actually the person still has a heartbeat. So eventually for us here, because many of our deaths occur from home, we prepare the person. If you take long to come back from your coma, by the time you try to attempt to come back, you are in the grave, and so you go just like that. But death, mortality data, that is how difficult it becomes to ascertain it, because many of the deaths are not occurring in the hospital. Many of these deaths are occurring at home, and there eventually people don't even bother to go and look for death certificates. People who bother to look for death certificates are those who have got property estates, because now they must process letters of administration so that they are able to effectively use those properties. Causes of death. When we are analyzing mortality, we look at the causes of death because it's vital. It helps us to distinguish between death, because at the end of the day we shall have what a category which we call as cause specific, i.e. we are looking at the cause. But basically there are two causes of death. We have endogenous death and exogenous death. And endogenous, we look at deaths that arise from genetic makeup of the individual, from circumstances of parental prenatal life, and the birth process. Death that result from degenerative diseases which move from one generation to another. Those that are connected to early pregnancy, birth injuries, and complications, all those are endogenous. If you pass away as a result of sickle cell anemia, that is an endogenous death because that was passed on from your parents. If you pass away during birth, as a result of birth injuries, that is endogenous. And we know a lot of women who are still dying because of childbirth. We have those issues which are related to early pregnancies. You conceive when your body is not yet ready to match with the pressure of the pregnancy, and you pass away. All those are endogenous death. However, exogenous death, on the other hand, they arise from internal or external causes, accidents, infections, etc. So coronavirus death are exogenous. HIV/AIDS death are exogenous. Bus accident death are exogenous. And all those other infections. Cancer are exogenous. Endogenous deaths have a typical biological character and they are quite resistant to scientific process. Like you're very well aware that there is no treatment for sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell, you can just prolong a little bit your years. Instead of dying a child, you die an adult. But there is no scientific process that can help you overcome it, because we are talking about birth defects, birth injuries. You are talking about genetic diseases moving on from one generation to another. While exogenous death, on the other hand, are relatively preventable and treatable if we could only be careful. For example, during this season, and we wash our hands, we cover our mouth, we cover our nose and mouth very well with our face masks. You can prevent catching coronavirus, and you can prevent a coronavirus death in your family, because in that way you would have protected your mother, your brother, your father, and all your siblings. They are quite preventable. If you can be careful on the road, you can prevent accidents. When we are analyzing mortality, there are certain factors that we look at. For example, accounting for variations in mortality is associated with a number of socio-economic characteristics of the people. Socio-economic characteristics of the people. The variations in death are a result of education attainment. There is a significant correlation between the level of education and the number of deaths occurring in a given population. It's assumed that when you are educated, then you also become too much aware about your health. In other words, you're a person who would routinely go for medical checkups, You're a person who would eat well because you know what your body needs. You're a person who would sleep well because you know a thing or two about hygiene. So that is why we are talking about educational attainment. We also talk about marital status, a significant relationship. Why is it that many people die when they are married before than when they are single? Of course, people have made the jokes that the reason married people die, and usually it's men. I remember I told you about this. The reason we die is because we marry women. People say that women are a problem, except mine. Mine is not a problem. Okay, so don't say that. Even yours, mine is not a problem. I don't know about Samantha and Ojoloi or Grace, but there are issues which arise out of marriage. When you get married, a lot of dynamics come into play. Take an example where you are married. I will give you a scenario. Maybe say Patrick and the rest. If you are married, don't say that I am saying that you will get married. I'm just giving an example. Please don't get offended. So if you get married, and you rest, you are a very careful person, faithful. On the other hand, Patrick is the playboy man, is the playboy guy who goes around and eventually, and the bad thing with this generation of today, I don't know about you, my students, you're going to tell me when we meet for the live session. People don't want to use protection. They have given up on it. Yeah. They say AIDS doesn't kill. That's the general view amongst you young people. I remember when I was still teaching in high school, kids would never mind. This life is funny. You would even find kids in a classroom having sex. You ask them, did you use protections? Because that's the first thing. Even before you punish them, you want to know that, and they will tell you that protection for what. So you have those scenarios where people are just and today it's even worse because we have people who are born with HIV and they are living healthy lives. Recently, someone was giving me an example of a certain boy in their neighborhood, somewhere in a small town up country there. He had just come to that place and he found there a young girl, a fresh. She's just a campuser because of this lockdown. They are not going to school. She's running I think a mobile money kiosk. And then he jumped onto her and things happened. Then a short while after, a few days, people said, but that girl, her parents passed away as a result of HIV. And she was born. Then the guy rushes, gets the girl out by force, takes the girl to a clinic to check, only to find that the girl is actually living positively. And the boy almost wanted to commit suicide. So, my dear brothers and sisters, daughters and sons, you need to be careful. But I was talking about marital status. People in marriage, usually it's only one person who brings sickness. It's either the woman who will bring to the husband or the husband will bring to the woman. And that's what usually happens. So when you get married, my brothers and sisters, be faithful. Make a faithful pledge. Say, we shall be faithful. I will be faithful. And let the other person also say the same thing. In that way, you'll be able. There are certain married couples who are even too selfish that they will know that they have actually contracted the sickness, but they will not tell their partners. In others, someone goes to an HIV clinics and starts taking ARVs, where the other person is not even aware. These days, they even tell us, we married people, when your wife is expecting, you go to hospital first antenatal visit. They need to check all of you for your blood status. Men refuse to go to hospital. They don't want to go. They hide away. So marital status. The other thing is occupation. Occupation is also involved. The kind of occupation you're involved in will determine whether you live long or you die early. If you are an army man in a country where there are wars, for example, right now there is war in Ethiopia. Somalia war has never ended. Uganda here just ended a few years ago. Countries like Afghanistan, war is there, has been there now for 20 years. Iraq, war is there. Syria, the war is there. Libya, all these countries. And if you are an army man, I remember one time someone joking that in Iraq, The life expectancy in Iraq is the hour, they are just hours. Because if you you thank God, because you can die anytime. The place was armed with suicide bombers all over. They would bomb anywhere at any time. So your life expectancy was a day. If you return home alive, you thank God. So occupation. There are these guys who are working in mines. In 2010, I think you guys were still young, but you're still young. Yeah, 10 years ago, most of you were still in your early primary. But there was this accident in Chile when Chilean miners were buried underground. They were quite lucky. They stayed there for 69 days and they were eventually rescued. They were 33 in number. But mining accidents kill people almost on a daily basis in China. On a daily basis. We have guys who are working in these other industries like electricity generation. You know how many people die in the electricity generation? People who are working, for example, border. You know, we had the highest mortality rate in Uganda is border mortality rate in this country. You're sitting on a border from Mukono to Kampala. By the time you reach, you thank, you pray, you're worshiping your Lord, because you don't know what is going to happen. They die on a daily basis in not small numbers. So occupation, there are guys who are working in these machines where you're not even allowed to blink. But if you blink like this, the machine goes with your hand, and you are gone. So there are those accidents, workplace accidents, which are killing people so much. Socioeconomic class here we are talking about our socioeconomic living. I've told it, I know by this age you are aware that poverty kills. Sometimes many people die because of poverty. Because if you're a poor man, you sleep poorly, you eat poorly, you get poor health care. So how would you survive? Compare that with, people keep saying that, hey, this president here is staying so long. But the man, his socioeconomic class is not your socioeconomic class. What can kill you common person here, Uboja in Eastern Uganda, cannot kill Museveni. Because Museveni will not be treated in Awoja Health Center 4, no, Health Center 3. He will not even be treated in Mulago, which for you think is the best in the country. He will not be even treated in the most expensive hospital in the country. He will be taken to the best doctors of the world. That's why every morning when you wake up and you're fine and you go to bed when you're fine, you need to thank God. Because imagine if you developed a cancer. How much money do you have that you will be able to go to India for treatment? Imagine if you developed some kind of a heart problem. How much money do you have that you will be able to go to hospital? So certain diseases just kill people. You have heard of scenarios where the family say, even the patient says, "Please take me home. I can't die from my home," because he knows the children are not able, they are struggling, and he wants to save them the stress. So he says, "Take me home. I can't die from my home." So they take you the person. But look at a scenario. Some of you have ever had jiggers. Can you have a jigger right now when your socioeconomic class is better? Right now you're a campuser. I can't expect you to be having jiggers. But when you're little children there in Kalungu, in Mbale, in Masaka, Makumbi, Yawerigwe, I know you had jiggers. Chizimula. In Wikwe. The jiggers were there. But right now, because you can afford shoes, I've heard of scenarios where jiggers have killed a person, and I wonder how did they even manage to kill the person? They said that the person had jiggers everywhere, in his feet, in his hand, in his buttocks, everywhere there were the jiggers. You say, what? How did they even come there? Socioeconomic class. That's why you guys, you must work very hard, and you become economically able. We have issues of age. Human beings are just like any other living things. As we age, of course, eventually after aging, you're expected to die. As you age, your body becomes weaker in terms of immunity, and that's why in this current situation they are saying that the elderly, are the ones who have been highly affected by this coronavirus, because their immunity is compromised in terms of age. They say you younger people, you will have the energy to fight off the virus. Of course, it shouldn't be a passport for you to move around anyhow. To move around anyhow. I know some of you are around, you've come around the campus, you moved there from your village and you're around the campus. And you've continued to live your normal lifestyles. Some of you are even cohabiting, which is against our rules, by the way. We'll get to know about it, we shall handle you. But you need to be careful. Don't count age as a passport for you to misbehave. The other issue here is gender. Talking about sex. Sex, when I mention sex here, I don't want you to think about something else. I refer to gender. Gender is also an important factor as far as mortality analysis is concerned. I remember I already told you that at childbirth, more boys are born than girls. But when you look at the upper age group, 60 and above, we have more women than men. Because women are careful human beings. Men are careless human beings. You go to church, so some of us who are born again Christians, even when you go to church, you will find more women. They have come to seek God. So God tends to take care of them more than us. Because the word of God says that if people called by my names shall turn away from their wicked ways and seek my face. Women are turning away from their wicked ways and seeking God's face. For us the men are continuing with their wicked ways. So God will not hear. Because in addition, that scripture says, then shall I hear from heaven. Turn away from your wicked ways, seek his face. By that turning away from your wicked ways alone is not enough. Because you must turn away and seek his face. Or you can seek his face, but when you have not turned away from your wicked ways, eventually you will not hear. God will not hear your pleas, your prayers. He will not. So women are quite careful. They are seeking God. They are going to hospital. A woman wakes up with an itching eye. She will go to hospital that morning before even going to work. A guy wakes up with an itching bum. You go to class. Then you see somebody shaking in class. You think the person is trying to scratch the itching part. Instead of going to Alan Galpin or going to a health center to get a treatment, you are there struggling. That's the problem with the men. And eventually, by the time you remember to go to hospital, the sickness has grown. You die. Lastly, we have the issue of race. People have been claiming of recent, I don't know if it's scientifically true, that the reason coronavirus has killed more whites, more Europeans. The Europeans, they have a different race than even the Asians and Africans. That it has killed more people. Of course, eventually, at the end of the day, you realize that we shall also have a lot of death here. But many of them are not being reported because we don't have the capability. But race is an important issue. Measures of mortality, we look at crude mortality, the mortality rate or death rate. We look at infant mortality rate. And then we also look at maternal mortality rate. Those are the measures of death that for in a given population we can calculate crude mortality, we can calculate infant mortality, we can calculate maternal mortality. So crude death rate, we simply looking at this, it's just calculated the same as crude birth rate, i.e. the annual number of people, the annual number of deaths per 1,000 of the total population. So it will be CDR equals death over total population times K, which is a constant. D is the number of deaths, P is the total population, and K is the constant. So you get the figure. Crude death rate is crucial because it's a measure of mortality which can be explained to the general public without much problems, and it shows the level of mortality in the entire population. When you go to a certain village and you say, in this village we lost 20 people last year. Very easy. Very easy. Someone will know that this village they buried 20 people last year. But in those 20 people, you don't know how many were children, how many died as a result of childbearing, how many died as a result of malaria, how many died when they were too old, how many died when they were youth. You don't know that. And that's why we are calling it crude death rate, because it does not give you those specifics. But nonetheless, it's the It's the basic. It can be easily explained to the general public without much problem. Because if you start explaining the person maternal mortality, then you will say, what are you talking about? Me, I just know my wife passed away. And you know, crude death rate encompasses all the other types of death. So it's quite easy to explain to the people. But however, it has got its own limitations because it mixes together many population groups and where mortalities differ. Because mortality rate is not the same in the infant age group, is not the same in the adult, is not the same in the older age group. It's also not the same in the female gender and the male gender. So, and yet crude death rate mixes all these ones together. Population with an old age structure is likely to have a higher CDR than a population with a younger age structure. So age is very important when we are characterizing mortality. But however, to overcome the limitations of CDR, of crude death rates, we can calculate death for specific age groups based on the UN classification, i.e. under the age of 1 year old, we call that one infant mortality. 1 to under 5, we call that one child mortality. And 5 to 75, we call that one adult mortality. So we can calculate based on that, and then we shall have the figures. So for today, I would want to stop there because I don't want this one always to be too lengthy. But then we shall pick up from there. If our interactive session is longer than this, we shall pick up from there and add on and go and look at infant mortality, and we'll look at cause-specific mortality, because death can be cause-specific. For example, when we talk about infant mortality, we say this is a measure of the mortality between 0 to less than 1 year. These deaths are given special attention, infant mortality. And when you look at different countries, they're always giving you the figures. Infant mortality, for example. Maternal mortality, for example. Because those ones are very important. Infant mortality figure is important than adult than elderly. That one above 75. Because someone of 75, that one they even say we are celebrating somebody's life. But the one who dies before 1 year, they say we have missed the potential of this person. Probably they would have been the person to become vice president of Bobby Wine. So you look at, we are looking at these issues. Infant mortality, it's where the population growth begins. That's where there is addition into a population. That's why infant mortality receives attention. That even the governments come up with policies to try and curb infant mortality. Because if you curb infant mortality, then the demographic transition model, the demographic transition changes, where you are having high stationary state, high birth rates, high death rates. If you can just curb mortality and say high birth rates, low death rates, the population will begin to grow. That's why we put emphasis there. So, like I said, we can stop there. We'll pick up from causes of infant mortality and move on from there. Be blessed.